So just the formality, can you see my screen okay? Perfect. So no, thanks a lot for the invitation. And we just had a small chat before you clicked off officially. So I actually visited Toronto back in August or September last year and did a physical meetup. So really, really a pleasure to be back virtually. And the topic today is about a new game of strategy, where I will talk about the role of strategy from an agile perspective, and also what it could mean for you as an agile coach. So just having clipped from the invite, I'll talk about how strategy and strategy execution are changing. Then I will talk about what does it actually mean, and I will argue that it means that we will have to reconfigure the way we organize into something which is more liquid, where liquid means power and freedom to change at will. So in many ways, the essence of agility. And then in the end, cover what could that actually mean for those of us who work with agile in larger organizations. And I hope to leave a bit of time in the end for questions and answers, so at least 15 minutes. I hope that's okay. So what we will talk about, bit of an overview: forced shift, new liquid mode. What is a strategy? What are the characteristics of strategy? The game of strategy, and with that I actually mean, how do you think about strategy? How do you work with it in the modern organization? Then about artificial intelligence and the big picture, because that has a role to play as well. And then to the advice and opportunity and what strategies actually do. And I'm going to suggest that those of you who has a foot in the agile camp actually might be excellent future strategists for your organization. And what I will talk about today is a bit new. Other people have been into it, but there's something happening in this topic at the moment, and you might be still the first to bring it to your team if you're quick. So our assumption is that it's your ability to react to unexpected events that determine long-term performance. So a bit inspired by what people remember Darwin is quoted to have said, is that it's the fastest adapter. But really, like, your ability to react to the unexpected is what determines long-term performance. Then strategy as a concept is really about working things to your advantage. And when I say things, I mean the professional things like the customer, the product, the market, the team, time, and there's not much else. So how can you juggle all of that to play in your favor in whatever you intend to do, is the idea of strategy. But well, the world is not always going our way. So increasingly unpredictable events are impacting profitability, meaning that companies just see more and more often that something surprising happens and it takes a big cut on whatever money they had been planning to bring in. And that's an externality, meaning that it's coming from outside. So it's not internal complexity, but external complexity that's growing. And that actually forces a shift in how we see strategy. So typically strategy has been like the North Star that you're heading towards and fleshing into initiatives that everybody's got to do when they have time. But actually more and more, it becomes about approach and how we collaborate. So rather than working towards a strategy, today, increasingly you collaborate around it. And that's a very fundamental shift, not only in how we understand it, but also how we work with it. And in this new operational mode, you can say what actually happens is that you will see teams collaborate around their strategy, each with what you can call accountable contributions. And you can talk about a liquid organization, which is an organization that can flow with the emergent opportunity. And that will be defined by accountable contributions, and that people forming networks of shared interest, so that actually in this network of shared interests, the accountable contributions will stack up to the outcomes. And then these networks of shared interest will work with other similar things to do even bigger things together. And the way this is organized is through a number of balancing acts, which involves each of these networks of shared interest to stay on their strategy. So strategy actually becomes a bit of a language for integration in the organization rather than something everybody is trying to implement. And the mantra in this type of organization configuration is that if something happens, then you respond first and integrate with others later, which basically gives two things. It gives like a very quick response when something is happening, but it also gives proactivity in terms of reintegrating with others as soon as possible after something has happened. I was just today having fun discussing with ChatGPT who else has been working on liquid organization. And of course, a bunch of people have been doing that. But actually what you see here is pretty consistent with some of the other significant contributions, that the idea of the liquid organization is that it's a free-flowing thing where people swarm around work, the networks of shared interests, and you have accountability, very strong responsibility as the center of everything in terms of driving the contributions. And that's actually pretty much it in terms of how you can see this organization. So liquidity implies some fractality, and it really is meant to mean the power and freedom to act at will, which is almost the closest you get to an essential definition of business agility, which is pretty much that you can change your mind whenever you want to do something more useful. So let's look a bit at what is strategy then, because we didn't talk much about it. And I'm a big fan of Roger Martin, who I believe has a certain affiliation with Toronto as well, if I understand correctly. At least it was a Canadian business school. And he often talks about choice as essential for strategy. I like to think of strategy as something that really is. So it's tangible, concrete. It is what you do and why you do it. So you can say it's an aspiration and an action. It's something that can be observed, tested, and changed. And then very significantly, actually strategy is the highest level of planning and coordination in most professional contexts. So when you look at what's the highest thing you use for planning and coordination, it will reflect or correspond to this idea that it's something we want to do, and the thought on how it's going to happen, that's at the center of that. Then the choice is also interesting in the way I look at strategy, because normally choice is driving action. So you have like your aspiration and make some choices to drive your action. But actually your choice can also be to change your strategy. So in that sense, the strategy both becomes an object and a subject of your actions, depending on whether you pivot or persevere. Then this is a bit of a mouthful, a long list of things, but it has its own significance. It's my reflection from another meetup group we had. Marta, you were there, and maybe a few other persons on the line have been visiting. But we had a number of people presenting how they see strategy and how they are working with strategy. And I was facilitating, not actually presenting my own things there, but listening to what everybody was doing. It gave me an idea of what's actually the characteristics of modern day strategy or contemporary strategy. So let's not go into all of them, but just pick a few. The last one, your work is your Lego, is something I have stolen with inspiration from the recent book, How Big Things Get Done, which is really worthy in its own right. But the idea is actually that when we work as knowledge workers with backlog and stuff, then our mendable thing is how we structure our work. So the more we can turn our work into the repeatable and comparable element, the more we can actually get things under control. So this idea of keeping work configurable is extremely powerful. Then there's the actionable. So if you have strategy, you really want your strategy to drive your choices and your action. Otherwise, it's not relevant. But then as things are pressed by increasing complexity, and if you insist on the actionability, things being actionable, then it also means that strategy becomes more local, and even you can argue get fractal, because it will repeat at many different levels in different contexts. So what you can infer from this idea of actionability is that strategy connects to identity, context, and time. It has temporal aspects, and it shows something that I heard John Cutler describe as your space of choice. I think he described it. And it really, in many ways, will be a reflection of your identity. Then there's the more classical ones, like distinctive, that you dare to choose, that your strategy actually represents a choice. There's what we talked about in the beginning, that it becomes reflective. It becomes a way of understanding your context, a way of making sense out of what's going on, as much as something that shows direction. And then the last one I will pick on is the one that's called integrative, because actually what you see is that strategy can become a language of integration. So when you have these networks of interest that works together across, a language for coordination becomes, how do the strategies stack up? How well do they integrate across? So worth to have a look at when you have a little extra time. So then now, what does that actually then mean for how you work with strategy? Well, strategy really is in many ways about opportunity. So turning things to your advantage, working with the opportunity that comes your way. If you remember, I looked at the liquid organization as something that could flow with opportunity. So that basically means that the constraint is not internal, but external, depending on what it actually makes sense to do. Then, based on the opportunity, you form your strategy, the aspiration and the action, which has this form of two together. You can call it a dipolic form, a bit like a water molecule. And that is then driven or driving choice. So you can choose action based on your strategy, or you can make a choice to change your strategy. What triggers that choice more and more, because of the external factors, the increasing complexity, is surprise. And you have three basic forms of surprise, which is kind of interesting. I haven't yet heard of a fourth form, but feel free to challenge me. So the light bulb is a bit like the COVID, a flash that's coming from a blue sky. The green light bulb is a bit like serendipity. It's a great idea that suddenly comes to you like an epiphany. And then there's the bubble, which are the types of things that grow on you and suddenly explode, that one day you wake up and realize that, OMG, this is really not what I thought it should be, or what I hoped it would be. I really want to get out of here as fast as possible. So the one thing that's in common for all surprise is that it happens now. It's always now, which means that you cannot really be planning for it. Well, you can be planning for surprise and have proactivity in your approach, but the surprise itself is new to you when it emerges. Then, let's see what's going on here. Then there is the last thing on this chart, which is tension. And tension just is. So tension is this, you all know it, like disagreement, dilemmas, paradoxes, the PO and the Scrum Master discussing. It can come from anywhere. And the thing about surprise and tension is that those are the things that actually give steer in this way of looking. It's things which are changing, which means that you need to choose differently. and either change your strategy or change your course of action, depending on what you have set out to do. Obviously, we want to do this to drive healthy outcomes, and you can talk about you want to have a healthy cost and revenue balance, and in the end, it's all to make the big Steve Jobs-like dents in the universe. So as the whole organization, of course, this needs to add up, and all the local instances need to integrate well for higher purpose. Here's another view of the same thing. And this is the last of this type of slides, but it basically shows the another dynamic view on how you triangulate constantly between your wish, your reality, and opportunity, which is emerging, bounded by external constraints, internal constraints, and the choices that you make. And then you can say in the middle of this, there is something you can call implied strategy, which is the best of your viable options. And this is a really interesting conversation to have with a team, to have this conversation like, what are we hoping to achieve? Where are we really? What are the things which are presenting themselves as opportunity and new options? And based on this, what's the best thing we can actually do? And I'll not talk so much about this, but this is the inner part of what you can call the balancing acts, which is all about choosing a focus, making sure that things are aligned or integrated, and that everybody are able to do what they take on, which means that you have fitness in the organization. So a little bit of view on no, there's someone in the meeting room, but I will leave it for you to in the waiting room, but I will leave it for you to let them in or decide not to. So then I just have to click this away. So then if you look at the digital side of things, now I first of all talked about what are the externalities, but also there's a huge digitization happening at the moment. And also the power of artificial intelligence both demands and invites an entirely different way of operating. And it was illustrated the other day by the Danish CEO, actually she's from Denmark and Iceland, having a blog on LinkedIn. And she ended by asking, what would you build if you had your own AI assistant? It is time to dream big and change your work. And then this wonderful chat GPT rocket that always gives you away. And what I was responding was that, well, I would build something to read backlogs and keep me on strategy 24/7, so that I would never need to do another PI planning. And this is actually close to the reality we are getting into, meaning that we can use the powers of digital to do a lot of the coordination of the planning, and then we can reserve the time for the thinking and the alignment of aspiration, which will be like a complete shift. So if you think about scaled agile practices like the PI planning, it's very much about making action add up. What this approach would suggest would be to say, forget about the action, but let's make sure we agree on what we are trying to achieve, like really focusing on the alignment of aspiration, and then pretty much leave it to the digital assistants and friends to figure out how can we make sure that all of the action adds up, potentially in a bit of a DevOps idea. And this is in line with a big trend that's going on at the moment, and I'll just gloss over this. But recently I came across a book called Stellar that predicts something that's called a stellar era by James Abib and Tony Seba. And it's really worth having a look at. There are some good YouTube videos out there. One is linked here in the presentation. But they basically say that we have three eras: the hunter-gatherer era, which is a long, long time ago. Then we have the whole industrialization, the extraction era, which is now ending with the industrialization, which is where we are exploiting natural resources for our benefit. And what they are predicting is that actually pretty much as we speak, this is going to be replaced or evolve into a stellar era. And the stellar era is interesting because that's defined by stellar technology, which is basically costless to operate once it is in place. So they predict a zero-cost future for things like labor, transportation, food, information, and a few other things. And also what is really interesting is that if you think about it, then as a manager, a digital agent has infinite span of control. I mean, it can really, without spending too much electricity and data capacity, remember all the names of the spouses and the kids and when they have birthdays and stuff like that. So literally, in many ways, when you move to digital coordination, also the span of control stops being a constraint. So it means that we can do different things. You also have the obvious thing like hunter-gatherer, no machines, industrialization. We were serving the machines, but in the future, it's predicted that the digital assistants will be serving us as humans. So a quite radical shift. Also, here and now, you can explain this as a transition from what Rita McGrath calls a transient phase to what I would call a liquid phase, and a few others have been talking about this. So why is this interesting? Well, it's interesting because there really are some significant discontinuities here. One is that in the transient phase, you worked on scale. When you look at the hierarchical organization, it's based on protecting access to people and information. So it's back from the days, at least in Denmark, where information arrived on horseback or by a pigeon. And you had to take really good care of it so that it didn't get lost or someone forgot it somewhere. To the digital era where it's not so much the access of information, which is important, but it's more the relevance of the information. So if you don't have the open access, you are just overly constrained from the beginning. So in that sense, it really is a clash between the open and the closed, where in the transient phase, and I know I'm a bit brief on this, it was all about delivering fast at scale with flexibility, typically what things like SAFe is really, really good at. But also this might explain why it's having a bit of a hard time at the moment, because really the direction things are going is that you need to have openness and you need to focus on the sense making, the navigation, as we talked about, from just executing and flowing things fast through. And just to give you a final taste on this, my Finnish friends from In Parallel have a feature where they can place calls to people and ask them how things are going. So to illustrate the idea of reduced cost and increased span of control, they can basically place 1,000 tailored personalized calls and summarize them faster than you can boil an egg, like literally faster than that. And if you think about how long would it take you to call your colleagues and ask them how is it going with the plan, then you can see that this is quite dramatic. So it really challenges everything we know about planning, status reporting, etc., in terms of the typical hierarchical role responsibility-based way of doing things. Coming to the end, a little bit of grandfatherly advice. We have 5 grandchildren and 2 on the way, so I can speak like that. Strategy is an instrument for understanding and avoiding opportunity loss. I mean, opportunity loss will be a very significant thing in the future. You simply cannot afford to miss out of an opportunity. The better you're able to absorb surprise, the better you will prosper in the long term. And strategy really has a key role to play I know it might sound weird because you hear famous people say that your strategy is not a plan and you only have one strategy, etc. Well, forget all of that. Forget all of that. It was true in the 70s, but really today it's quite different. So strategy is a bit of a language for integration, with this idea that you're aligning on aspiration and doing reconciliation on action. A bit like the DevOps thing is that you're integrating your action as they emerge and appear in like a dynamic real life puzzle is not far from the reality. And then the job for us is to help our team stay on strategy, because when you are on strategy, you have the clarity on what you're trying to achieve, which is important in itself, but it also actually helps you to see when things are changing so you can change faster and rebalance. In keeping you on strategy and even helping rebalancing when you know what you want to do, AI is an amazing friend. So the new opportunity, well, I almost gave it away a few times, but really the new opportunity would be to help our team stay on strategy, to be like a sense broker and a steward for useful collaboration. We don't want anybody to get hurt or die in the process. There has been a lot of talk about psychological safety. This is it. I mean, I don't like to think of it as something you gloss on the organization, but of course, something like that needs protection every day. And people who used to work in agile roles are really excellently positioned to go into this. So long story short, agile coaches are great at this. And what does the job look like? This one I was inspired by a Swedish person called Christian Norling, who were looking at what are the jobs the strategies do, and I extended a bit on it. So you can say the classical job for strategy was to make the strategy and then anchor it across in initiatives that you would then follow up on, the classical strategy execution. That's the control and alignment. But this is really significantly changing and the balance is shifting. So today it's much more about building connection, catalyze useful collaborations, be a steward of the balancing acts, create the shared understanding. And you're native English speakers, at least I believe you are. But I'm a Danish speaker, and I'm totally confused about words like coercion, cohesion, alignment, unification, whatever. You have like 17 words for something that the Swedes have just one nice word for, which means that we see things equally or we see things the same. It's called samsyn. We don't even have such a great word in Danish, which is my native language. But what we mean is that, so shared understanding really means that we know what the others think. It doesn't mean that we are thinking the same, but it means that we know what the others think, and it's okay, and we have chosen a focus together. We are aligned, you could say in English. And then it's about integrating the contributions, piecing the puzzle together as you make the pieces, to eventually make these big dents in the universe. That's pretty much what I got. This is what we went over. And if you want to connect, if you want to work with this, if you want to be the first to bring this to your organization, very happy to have some conversations. It's not going to cost you more than the coffee, I promise. Like we joked in the beginning, I'm a bit nerdy with this, and I really enjoy seeing how it's working in practice too. Back to you, Nas.
Thanks, Morten. Yeah, so I'm looking at the chat. I think we are good with respect to chat. Aaron was asking something. I don't know what is this YouTube channel link he was asking for. Is Aaron still on the call? What was that about?
He was asking about what you mentioned as YouTube links that you of the recording that you post on the Meetup page. I answered him.
Okay, yeah, the recording would be on Meetup page. Yeah, thanks.
That's what he
That is pretty much what we have. No question in the chat. Anybody has any questions for Martin?
I have one actually. It's multiple questions packed in one. I
Go ahead.
wonder how. Yes, thank you. I wonder how do you know, people in management or even consulting react to this concept of fluid strategy? Do they get it, or what's the reaction to this?
So there's a number of very different reactions, and I think the most common reaction is that people don't really accept that this is a problem. And then there are a few out there who really think like, oh, wow, this is the best presentation they have ever seen. Because it's making tangible a shift that a lot of people have been thinking of, but not really been able to pin down. Also because the advice for the grandfathers of strategy are quite different from what I'm talking about. But the interesting thing is that when you speak with people, there's always something fishy around the strategy. I mean, it's something that where you spend time thinking the big thoughts, but also a lot of people have difficulties translating those into the reality. And of course, it doesn't mean that it's useless, but somehow it's an area that we never really got the grip on. We talk about the strategy execution gap. And that's just beginning to bite harder, because you don't only need the strategy to get smart things done, you also need the strategy as a navigational and sense-making instrument. And that's something you just cannot compensate for. But I mean, I'd like to ask you as well, is there anything at all that resonated, or was it too fast and too abstract? And if it was, that's totally okay as well. It's useful for me to get the feedback.
You asking me or everybody?
Well, that means, Maru, I'm also asking you, but yes, I meant it
Okay.
as a general question.
Okay. No, yeah, I didn't get it from the context. Yeah, I for me it resonates. But I still think that a few more concrete examples how to put those, events, triggers, surprise, like you said, and the constraints and the ambition, the action, the choice and the action, instead of how it looks like concretely, would be nice. Would make it more
Yeah.
concrete. But I've also been beating the pavement with my own views on strategy for years, and I've always hit the same wall of centralized, top-down, long-term definition, and you got to execute. That's why I'm allergic to the words strategy execution, strategy alignment. I don't want to get in there, but I've become allergic to them, because it's for me it's a symptom of the rigidity and all the friction that is unnecessary that we experience.
Yeah. So there is some practicality behind it. Let's not spend time on it now. But this is based on many years of experience on how I have been working. So here's an outline on how would you time-wise introduce some of the things. And you can even use it for crisis intervention. So that means that in less than 24 hours, you can stand these ideas up and have an executive team work like I'm talking about. So it's not a big physical shift, but it's a relatively big mental shift. But if anyone is interested, have a look, and happy to talk you through it in more concrete terms if anybody wants to give it a shot.
I have a question about the last slide too, while waiting for other voices to raise their hands. The slide just before this one, where you summarized part of the discussion in the slide before last.
This one?
No, the one right after. Not before, after. Yeah. So, what is for you? I mean, the game of strategy. What's the So what's the relation to this fluidity and the transition cycles that you showed, from the world where we serve the machine, where this machine serves us and the cost is low and AI is going to play a role. What is the game of strategy? Yes, that's the related one. Yeah, the one with the faces.
Yeah. So the game of strategy
Game.
used to be to drive value, to predict where to go and strategize around how to get there. So still the aspiration and the action together. The new game is that because the external factors are increasing in impact, there are some even some scientific results documenting what we all know is that the external factors increasingly are biting on things like profitability. So that basically means that rather than being able to predict where to go, you really need to be able to recalculate what you want to do when you are presented significant new pieces of information. And that's the skill that really makes the difference. You still need to figure out to do the right thing, but when the right thing is no longer the right thing, you've got to be able to find the next right thing as fast as possible. And that's the skill that that differentiates.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Yes,
Yeah.
because the higher
And
speed and the high. So you were saying something, Morten? FD what?
no, it's just to emphasize again that really, in many ways, is the essence of business agility, is that you can have the whole organization in a coordinated fashion quickly change its focus to something new. So it's that ability to coordinate, having that liquidity, the freedom and power to change and flow with opportunity that is desirable.
Yeah. Yeah, I just in one sentence, it totally makes sense for me. Yes, we need to be able to to analyze where we are to make sense of the new conditions around us much faster. Just because everything keeps getting even faster than even 5 years ago. It just doesn't seem to want to stop. Yeah. And, thank you, Martin.
Well, if we have just one more minute, and then I'll hand back to you now, and I can show where this is at the moment. So at the moment, I'm having special focus on going to small and medium scale enterprises, because interestingly, that segment of business has started to pay more interest to strategy. So the smaller companies, like even 10, 20 employees, it's a real issue that they got to be on their toes, because when reality hits, it normally hits quite hard, because a company of that scale is so deeply focused on working with the customer, serving it market, that there's little time for something else. But even they have started to look more into this. And I use this for simply just having conversations. These are literally my hand-drawn stickies. They don't glue, so I can put them on the table. And then we talk about it and I pick them up. I should probably have taken Dave Snowden's advice and used hexes, because they are just smarter for some of this. I used that in the graphics, but I simply didn't have them. But it works quite well. And what you see here is pretty much the extended vocabulary of what we talk about in those conversations. And every time I feel a need to draw in a new concept from the stuff I have been working with, it would be here. But this is the list. So if you want to have fun with it, this might be a place to start, to just have a look. What is here? What does it mean? Think of it, the difference between figuring out what to do. I was asked that in a job interview many years ago. Are you the guy who can crack the code? Are you the one who can figure out what to do? And of course I said yes, and I didn't get the job. But that's the totally wrong question today, because nobody can figure it out. I mean, the customers have no idea what happens tomorrow. So even the idea of customer centricity is challenged, because maybe they need a car rather than a faster horse. a bit more often than they used to. So have a look. It's all here. So this list and the characteristics of modern strategy, there's some really powerful stuff in there. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Thanks
you.
more. Yeah, this one was great. Like, can I ask a couple of
Yes, of course.
couple of thoughts? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm on a very different tangent. Like, what about those disruptive events, right? So we went through the right. I think the pandemic, right? Right. Like so. Right. Like so. That is maybe one in a lifetime event. But now we are going through tariffs, right? The tariff wars, right? So I was just thinking, like, where does this fit into the ecosystem? Where whatever we do is not good enough, right? Like there are certain I don't know, factors that may impact us in some ways, right? More or less. So what is oh yeah, okay, so this is very good.
No. So you're right, and you can say, well, I would say this is still a surprise, and then you can say, well, during COVID there were some clever guys who sold the shares, and they became very rich, but most of us were stuck with them, right? And we just had to take the hit. So the thing with a surprise is that it always comes now, and you simply cannot be surprised out of the moment. The impact of the surprise can travel in time. I mean, you can learn something surprisingly that makes you regret a choice you made 10 years ago, or you can learn something today that makes you cancel an order that should be delivered 5 years from now. So the impact can travel in time, but the surprise is always now. And there simply are no or different types of surprises than the one you're looking at here. And they are even overlapping in a sense. And for the surprise itself, like I said, it doesn't matter so much. The point is that you see it and you do something about it. And then later you can rationalize about it. Still, it's quite interesting to try to understand what's the nature of the things that bites us. And that's what we are looking at here. So it's like the serendipity idea, the new opportunity, it's the sudden shift. It sounds like the trade thing is a bit like that. At least I know it was boiling for a while. So you can also say it was bubbling. But it really came as a bit of a sudden shift when the reality was hitting. Or the bubble is typically the big project like the Boston Big Dick, or every city has their own incarnation of this one, like something that just went crazy overboard and you should never have done it and you would never do it again, but still here you are, and the bubble burst, and how do you deal with it? But those are the things that you've got to figure out how to deal with, which is actually also why you need to have the coupled organization so information can travel. So it's not enough that somebody sees something. It doesn't really help if that person is not telling it to the person who really needs to know it, or doesn't know who really needs to know it. So you need to gear the whole system to be better able to handle surprise.
Yeah. There was another thought, actually, a couple of thoughts. Sorry, like yeah.
No, please.
One was on that. What is the secret recipe, right? Some things that one company can do, but the other one cannot. Like I give you a couple of examples. One is the Amazon Fire phone, right? Like so we know what happened to that, right? Like so they were trying to replicate the success of iPhone, right? The Amazon, right? The company is successful, but could not, right, get successful in that strategy to get into the phone business. Same thing with Google, right? Google Plus, right? They were trying to compete with Facebook. So what is that, right? What is that pivot look like, and why some companies like find success and some don't? Even as a company, they are probably successful, but they are not successful in that strategic piece, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. I think there's another aspect of this which actually comes from the options theory. So it's well known that you can change your luck. Oh. There you go. I'm sorry, Navas, it was me who let him in. It's I
Yeah,
don't know if you knew, but I admitted that person. So
it's
and
okay.
I
I
told you I
removed it.
wouldn't.
I removed
So
it.
I'm really sorry about that. It was much more innocent than what I experienced in one of my meetups. So we are still good.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
where did you come
remember.
from?
I was there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I learned my lesson. Please, where did we come from? I lost it.
Sorry. Yeah.
Please repeat your question.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, some companies, when they try to strategize around certain, like, right, the Amazon was trying to compete in the
Oh, yeah.
food business, and Google was trying to
Yeah.
compete in the social media business, right? Why they were not successful? Even companies are successful, but that strategy did not generate success for them.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, first of all, you need to be aware of the thing called retrospective coherence, which means that when somebody has done something super clever, they are very good at explaining how easy it is. And of course, a lot of the best practices we hear about are irreplicable in other contexts. But the one thing that really works, and which I constantly play on, is that you can change your luck not by being more lucky, but by being less unlucky. That's the idea in options theory. So if you can find a way to hold your hand under unluck and cut your losses early, it basically means that you shift the probability distribution in favor of having more luck. And that's the whole idea in mantras like managing at the speed you can afford to lose. That's why Agile operates in sprints, because you can afford to lose a sprint, but you cannot afford to lose, in safe terms, like a PI. So you got to figure out what's your exposure in terms of what you can afford. And if you consistently work on being less unlucky, that's like the operational excellence way of creating more strategic opportunity. Then being a person who has worked for Nokia, I know all the pain of the iPhone, and a lot of what the world thinks happened is not really true, but in many ways it is true that it was arrogance and complacency that led Nokia to not fully pick up the bat in that fight. They might have lost it anyway, and I think that's a subtle thing about customer preferences. My favorite model is the Kano model, which is the one where you can use to think about dissatisfiers, performers, and satisfiers. I have used that many times, and I think in operational excellent terms, which is what I'm presenting. I mean, I'm a strategy execution person, not a strategist, but the balance is shifting. So there's a lot of relevance in that role too. But while you can only win on a few parameters by differentiating yourself, for example, if you look at the retail business, some of those have differentiated themselves some years ago by going online and creating like an online store. It's one new variable on top of a handful of variables that segment competes on. But the number of places you can lose is literally infinite. So that's why it makes a lot of sense to look at where does the trouble come from and how can you hold your hand under it, so you have your full capacity to focus on innovation and growth, etc., and doesn't have to go and deal with the gray slush here and there and everywhere in the organization all the time.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yeah. If I had the answer now, I
Yeah, funny
wouldn't
you
be
brought
here,
up
right?
Nokia, because I think Microsoft did not learn from Nokia's mistake and repeat that mistake again. The Microsoft experiment with Nokia, I'm talking, like, thinking about. Yeah. So
yeah. Well, that was probably not their most clever business decision. I worked at Nokia at the time, and I met Stephen Alop in the lift once in Nokia House in Espoo. And at the time, the idea, as I understood it, I was not so high in the organization, was that you had iOS, you had Android, but the operators or the carriers, as they are called in the American continent, I believe, wanted a third option. So the belief was, just like I said, hold my hand, was that if if Nokia and Microsoft could get their act just a little bit together, the carrier ecosystem would hold their hands under them and force them under the Christmas trees because they wanted to retain a competitive situation. But I think the verdict on that marriage was, I don't remember who wrote it, but someone wrote a tweet saying that two turkeys do not make an eagle. And that somehow seems to be the verdict on that marriage.
Yeah, I mean, the Microsoft guy was, right? I'm struggling to remember the name. It was,
Stephen
I think,
Elop.
no, the Microsoft guy, the Steve Ballmer, was it? Like, he make fun of iPhone, right? When
Yeah, so he was the, I think
$700
he
phone,
was
right?
leading at the time.
Yeah. Who's going to buy
Yeah, but
$700 phone?
yeah, so Stephen Elop was the one who came from Microsoft to take on the leadership of Nokia.
Mm. Yeah. Nice. And anyone has any question? We are overtime. We are running in overtime now.
Just a thought. Um, the way you guys reacted to the Zoom bomber is a good reminder that part of strategy is knowing what we did well in the past and where it could be reused efficiently in the future. It's not always about solving something in some destructive way, innovatively, etc.
Yeah.
There is multiple layers to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the multi-speed organization by Gartner is the same thing. So you want to say something, Morten?
No, it's a good point, Mauro, and believe me, I practiced on this one. So, but it is actually a good reminder that I mean, there's endless things that can kill you, but only few things that can make you win. So the more you can get on top of all the things that drags you down, the more freedom you have to operate in your good space.
Yeah,
I think that's actually the biggest secret of all.
Yeah, it's basically part of it is understanding your own strengths, your own assets, your own created assets in the past, like SOPs that work really for you with your own operations, with your own infrastructure, and knowing when to pull them out and shoot them, like arrows where it's relevant. Because these are unfair advantages. These are not things that can be copied by other people. This is not something you acquired by buying it. You acquired by developing it, by learning, by growing. So there, I mean, SOPs, for example, like cybersecurity. You can't just copy cybersecurity from another company. You can't. You really need your own cybersecurity strategy and architecture, and it's unique every single time. But anyway, I think cybersecurity is a fascinating area, including for strategy, because you have clear players and you have clear motivations for each player. So it's really interesting to study for strategy purposes.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Last word from me. I know this must have been a little bit confusing or maybe not so clear, but if you later become curious and want to look at it, I normally say that my things come with a lifetime warranty. So you're welcome to ping me for an extra conversation. Thanks a lot, Navas. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for this fantastic.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, there is a question in the chat, but I think it's too late. Sorry.
It is very late in Denmark, so I think
I have time, of course, if there is one more question.
Okay. We can. Would you like to come off mute? I don't know if
Igor.
Igor, yeah.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So yeah, my question is, how it's useful to define strategy with some OKR approach, introducing some key results, and yearly or based on quarter base approach to define how close we are to the strategy. And yeah, this is my question.
No, it's a good question, and you're spot on. So if you go with the idea that strategy essentially is aspiration and action, then that fits quite well with the OKR idea. I would just say that you have to be careful to keep it simple and focused and not go overboard in OKRs. But aspiration action directly in OKR language. And I like to think of the key results also to have extension in time. So you can say key results are outcomes over time, that you can draw them up like this. And it's really just to experiment with it. My favorite book on OKRs is still John Doerr's original book. I really like the spirit he put into it. And I think a lot of of course, there are many good people working with this, but also many of the later refinements in my mind overdo it. It's a bit, you can say it's the clarity paradox, because normally people think that you need to be so clear that you can do it without thinking, which is the machine thinking way. But you only need to be clear enough to see that it's wrong. Okay, so you actually don't need perfect clarity or perfect precision in the things you set up. They just need to be good enough that you can see when what you thought was right is no longer right, and you need to go looking for a new right. That's the whole idea. And as humans, we are really good at doing this intuitively. So try to keep it as intuitive as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I got to show my template. And it's all in the things I shared with you. So you can pick it up from there.
Thanks, Morten, again, and thanks for everyone for staying back. I think we have an overdrive today, but it's fine, I guess. Little late in
Thank
Denmark.
you.
I know.
It's so late that it doesn't matter, so I can keep going until the early morning. No, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it again.
Thanks. Have a good one, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.